Imagine a room drenched in shadow, thick with cigar smoke and the unbearable weight of impossible decisions. It is 1944. The American carrier fleet is intact, rising from the sea like a vengeful hydra. The oil fields are burning, the perimeter is shrinking, and yet the Emperor demands victory. But deep within the underground bunkers of Tokyo, in the hushed, heavily guarded chambers where the fate of the nation was decided, a few select men finally spoke the forbidden words. The words that acknowledged absolute, inevitable, catastrophic defeat. What did the architects of Japan's war machine truly say when the illusion of empire finally shattered? This is the sound of denial giving way to apocalypse. In the early days of the war, Japanese high command was characterized by a profound and almost blinding arrogance. They had swept through Southeast Asia, crippling the American fleet at Pearl Harbor and seizing vast territories. The common phrase echoing through the Navy and Army headquarters in 1942 was kachidoki, or the cry of victory. They believed the West, particularly the soft, democratic United States, lacked the spiritual fortitude to fight a prolonged total war. Their primary strategy was simple: shock the Americans into suing for a negotiated peace before they could fully mobilize their overwhelming industrial capacity. But victory, they soon learned, was a fleeting, toxic vapor. The first true tremor, the first instance where the inner circle had to confront the terrifying mathematics of modern warfare, came at Midway in June 1942. 4 irreplaceable aircraft carriers, the heart of the Imperial Navy, were sunk in one crushing blow. In the immediate aftermath, the official reports were sanitized, obfuscated, and outright lied about. The public was told of minor setbacks, but behind the heavy doors of the Navy General Staff, the tone shifted drastically. It was not yet despair, but it was confusion mixed with a brutal sobriety. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor, already knew the truth about America's industrial might. He had famously warned his colleagues before the war that he could run wild for 6 months. But after that, he had no expectation of success. When Midway happened, the 6 months were up. The words spoken then were not of surrender, but of chilling fatalism. Yamamoto is reported to have remarked with grim certainty that they had just witnessed the turning of the tide. The internal discussions focused not on winning the war outright, but on a grim, desperate new objective: making the war so bloody, so costly for the Americans, that they would demand a ceasefire. This philosophy, known as attrition, became the core strategy, but it masked a terrifying secret. They had accepted that they could no longer achieve their original goals. As 1943 bled into 1944, the situation metastasized from grim to terminal. The island-hopping campaign by the Allies, Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Kwajalein, was slow, agonizing, but utterly relentless. Each island was a meat grinder where Japanese defenders fought to the last man, only to have their sacrifice negated by the next American amphibious landing. The true moment of realization for the core political and military leadership, the Supreme Council for the Direction of the War, known informally as the Big Six, came with the fall of Saipan in July 1944. Saipan was catastrophic for 2 reasons. Militarily, it meant the permanent loss of the inner defense perimeter and exposed the Japanese mainland to the new long-range B-29 bombers. Politically, the loss of Saipan forced the resignation of Prime Minister Hideki Tojo, the great symbol of Japan's military zeal. In the ensuing secret meetings held shortly after Tojo's fall, the air was thick with accusation and dread. When the Army Chief of Staff presented the casualty figures, the conversation pivoted from strategy to logistics. The High Command was forced to admit the unspeakable. Japan was running out of oil, out of metals, and most critically, out of skilled pilots and seasoned troops. One of the few pragmatic voices remaining was Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo. He began to argue, subtly at first, for exploring peace options, But his words were met with explosive resistance from the hardline army faction. What did the zealots say when confronted with the reality of industrial defeat? They invoked Gyokusai, honorable death, shattered like a jewel. General Korochika Anami, the powerful war minister, refused to acknowledge defeat until the very last moment. He and his colleagues argued that statistics were irrelevant. The spirit of the Japanese soldier, they insisted, would eventually break the American will. The words spoken by these generals were not strategic arguments, they were religious dogma. They stated they must shift to a strategy of total national sacrifice. Their internal narrative was, if we cannot defeat them on the seas, we will lure them onto our beaches, where the entire nation, men, women, and children, will become human shields and destroyers. This was the blueprint for Operation Ketsugo, the defense of the homeland. This is the point where the true horror of the Japanese High Command's delusion becomes clear. They knew the war was lost, yet they resolved to sacrifice 20 million citizens rather than accept unconditional surrender. If you are finding this deep dive into the historical transcripts and the grim reality behind closed doors fascinating, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. We spend countless hours digging through declassified documents to bring you the untold stories of history's most pivotal moments. It helps this channel tremendously and ensures you don't miss our next investigation. By early 1945, the situation was beyond dire. American forces had secured Iwo Jima and then launched the brutal invasion of Okinawa. Okinawa confirmed the worst fears of the American strategists and the worst intentions of the Japanese militarists. The Japanese defenders fought with unimaginable fanaticism, and civilian casualties were astronomical. In the bunkers beneath the Imperial Palace, the atmosphere was poisonous. The Big Six were hopelessly split between the faction desperate for peace and the faction determined to commit national suicide. The peace faction, led by Togo and Admiral Mitsumasa Yonai, began secret overtures through neutral Russia, hoping the Soviets would mediate a favorable peace that would protect the emperor's position. But the militarists, primarily Anami and the chiefs of staff, flatly refused to give up 4 key points. The punishment of war criminals must be handled by Japan. Japan must occupy and disarm its own troops. No allied occupation of Japan, and the absolute preservation of the emperor. The argument that raged in those meeting rooms was highly theatrical and deeply personal. The militarists demanded one last decisive battle on the shores of Japan itself. Their chilling logic was recorded in meeting notes from March 1945. They argued that if the Americans saw the Japanese people fight with the same zeal as they had on Okinawa, sacrificing half their population, the Americans would become exhausted and offer better terms. One general is recorded stating, "We must inflict such a horrible wound upon the enemy that the thought of continuation will make their stomachs turn. Only then will our sacrifice have meaning." The peace faction countered that this was insanity. Foreign Minister Togo presented intelligence showing that the American invasion was imminent and that their forces were already marshalling the largest fleet in history. The crucial exchange involved Admiral Yonai, who reportedly stood and spoke directly to the generals. "The condition of the country is already known to the enemy. We are totally defenseless against the B-29s, and our people are starving. If we wait for the enemy to land, we will be destroyed without fulfilling any of our conditions. To continue is to destroy the very core of our nation." This was the first time that a powerful member of the High Command stated unequivocally, in blunt terms, that the war was not just lost, but that further fighting would equate to national extinction. But the militarists still held the ultimate trump card: the sanctity of the Japanese warrior code. They could not conceive of surrender without dishonor. Their primary phrase was "Ichiman nen," 10,000 years. Meaning they were prepared to fight for eternity. The debate ground to a stalemate. The High Command realized the war was lost, but they could not agree on the words to end it. They were paralyzed by their own culture of honor. Then came the hammer blows. On August 6, 1945, Hiroshima vanished. The initial report received by the High Command was baffling. The Americans had used a new type of bomb, devastating an entire city. General Anami, still clinging to the doctrine of endurance, suggested that the Americans had only one such bomb, and they must withstand the psychological shock. 3 days later, Nagasaki was destroyed, and that same day, the Soviet Union, having previously pledged neutrality, declared war and flooded into Manchuria. The combination of the two atomic bombs and the betrayal of the Soviets finally broke the will of the Zealots, not through reason, but through sheer overwhelming terror. The Japanese military could handle conventional defeat. They could not comprehend the end of the world delivered by a single bomber. The pivotal meeting took place on the night of August 9th and into the 10th. The Big Six met with the Emperor Hirohito present, an almost unprecedented event. For hours, the debate raged. The terms of the Potsdam Declaration, unconditional surrender, were on the table. The army still insisted on holding out for those 4 key conditions, especially guaranteeing the emperor's safety. War Minister Anami, his face drawn and exhausted, spoke with immense emotion. He stated that the army was ready to fight to the last man. He asked for one final opportunity for the troops to demonstrate their loyalty, promising to cause catastrophic losses to the invading Americans. In that charged atmosphere, surrounded by men who had dedicated their lives to victory, the words of the peace faction were simple but final. Admiral Yonai said, "The whole world knows we are finished. If we continue, the foundation of the emperor system itself will be destroyed. We must endure the unendurable." The deadlock remained until the emperor himself spoke. Emperor Hirohito rarely intervened directly in political or military strategy. But in this moment of national crisis, he saw his duty clearly. He spoke quietly, with a clear voice that transcended the noise and fanaticism of the room. His words were not a tactical analysis, but a decree of compassion and tragic necessity. He stated that he could no longer stand to see his people suffer, that continuing the war would only lead to the obliteration of the Japanese race and the extension of universal suffering. He concluded with the words, "I swallow my tears and give my sanction to the proposal to accept the Allied proclamation on the basis outlined by the foreign minister." These were the final words that mattered. The moment the emperor spoke, the internal struggle within the high command ended. The realization that the war was lost transitioned from a secret, horrifying fact held by a few admirals to the highest order of the land. The tragedy of the Japanese high command was that they realized the war was lost years before they spoke the words. They realized it at Saipan when their inner perimeter crumbled. They realized it every time a B-29 flew unchallenged over Tokyo. Yet, they refused to articulate that truth until the absolute destruction of their country was imminent. Their final words were not of surrender, but of heartbreaking resignation and obedience to their divine ruler. General Anami, the staunch defender of the warrior spirit, could not live with the shame. The night before the surrender was publicly announced, he wrote a final poem apologizing to the emperor for his failure and committed ritual suicide, completing the cycle of fatalism and honor that had dictated Japan's tragic course. The words spoken by the high command when they finally accepted defeat were simply "Shusen," the end of the war. But the unspoken truth they carried was the realization that their zealous pursuit of honor had cost the lives of millions and brought their ancient nation to the very brink of oblivion. The history of the Japanese High Command realizing the war was lost is a profound lesson in the danger of allowing ideology to supersede reality. When the statistics told the truth, they insisted on the superiority of spirit. When the bombs fell, they were finally forced to confront the hard, cold language of steel and physics. If this analysis opened your eyes to the hidden pressures and tragic decisions made in the closing hours of World War II, please share this video with a friend who loves history. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. Thank you for watching.